Right, give people a minute to arrive. My computer was a bit annoying. It's decided to do a kind of did a forced update on me, taking ages, where I just was looking at a line going across my turned off computer for ages and ages and ages and ages and ages. But I'm here now, and that's the important thing. So yeah, that's very annoying. Hello. So if you just missed that, my computer did my MacBook Air thing, did an update with a nice line just slowly going, so I couldn't do anything on the computer. But I am here now, so I'm not dead. You know, when I'm doing this pretty much every day. Thank you. When I'm doing this pretty much every day, obviously I have done for the last 54 days or whatever it's been, inevitably there's bound to be some random issues that crop up. So that's what I'm reading today. So my latest book has obviously arrived. Finally, it took a very long time to arrive. It's a bit bigger than my other books. It's almost the same size as those two. So yeah, so it's just obviously loads of scripts. So I'm not going to read that one to you because that would take you that would probably zonk you out. So let me put that one aside. So today we're going to be talking about therapy in action, and then the conclusion. It is a fat book. Let me just move my drinks to this side. I'm going to drink the coffee first, so I'll move the coffee first. Now I can drink some of the coffee. Hello. So as I mentioned yesterday, what I'll do is I'll read some bits, and I kind of give little headings for those who've already swatted up and read ahead. I give some headings in here to kind of just give an idea of what I'm going to be doing in that section of the session. So I'll probably stop at some of those headings and see if there's any questions, anything anyone wants to say or ask or anything. So this is a therapy session for improving artistic abilities. And I don't have to tell you why I was doing this because I think I actually mentioned it in the writing. So this is a transcript of a therapy session that includes my analysis to show what's going on, to create change, and to explain a little of what I'm doing. In this session, I'm helping the client to improve their artistic abilities. I'd looked at research into creating savant abilities in people. So that's the work of people like Dr. Alan Snyder, and thought it may be possible to do this with hypnosis. This session was from about 2005. It was an hour long and the only session required to help this client improve their artistic abilities and to still maintain and develop that improvement further as time has gone on, even at the time of writing this in 2018. The annotated transcript has been included to demonstrate the Ericksonian approach in action. I use a D for when I'm speaking and a C for the client. The analysis of what I'm doing is cut into the session where I felt it's useful to note techniques or language patterns that I'm using. Hopefully this session will give you a good overview of how the techniques and learning from this book can be applied during therapy, helping to bridge the gap between theoretical learning and practical application of hypnotic and therapeutic skills. And you can obviously find this over on the Facebook group. So in both of the Facebook groups, the Sleep Stories Guided Sleep Meditations group I've put it in there, and you can find it in the Dan Jones Hypnotherapy Studies group as well. I asked the client to draw a picture of a horse in 1 minute, and at the end, I'll ask them to do the same again. So that was his high quality picture of the horse at the beginning, taking 1 minute. For reference, while this session was taking place, I was matching the client's arm positions, breathing, leg positions, and leaning in at about the same angle the client is leaning back. This all helped with rapport and building a deeper connection with the client and their model of reality. D. Looking down from the client. When was the last time you, looking up at the client, went into a trance? C. I don't know, probably I went into a trance, well, probably last week, Tuesday this week, because I was pruning my bonsai tree. When was the last time you, looking at the client in the same way I did above, went into a deep trance? Looking down, do you remember, looking back up at the client, what one is like? Yep, you do, vaguely. How I often start out inducing a hypnotic trance is by getting the client to recall a previous trance experience. If a client says they've never been in a trance before, then I ask them what they think it will be like, or what they expect it to be like, or I ask them about everyday trance states, like leisure activities. All the words in italics are embedded commands or suggestions. They're part of the communication I'm adding extra emphasis to by using a slightly deeper tone of voice, defocusing my eyes and relaxing my facial muscles, all to imply trance through modeling what I'm expecting. I imply that the client has got experiences of entering a trance and deep trance by using the term when. I don't ask, have you ever been in a trance? In some cases, I may ask, have you, if I strongly suspect they may not understand or realize that they have. If I do this, I would use the term before at the end of the sentence, as before implies either before the one that they're in now or the one they're going to be going into. I very often use feeding back as a way of embedding suggestions or commands. For example, when the client says yeah, I respond with the command you do. I'll often turn questions to statements with the tone of my voice. By feeding back what was just said, you also begin to form a yes set. This is where you get a yes response that helps to build rapport, displays understanding, and makes it more difficult for the client to respond negatively to the work you do. If you get someone to say 3 or 4 yeses, then give a suggestion you want them to follow, they're more likely to do it than if you just give them the suggestions on their own. This client showed signs of not wanting to commit just yet by responding to my feeding back with the response vaguely rather than responding by saying yes. He just answered my question by saying that he can remember what a deep trance is like, but almost immediately became indecisive. Thank you for sharing the session. So, seeding priming using metaphor. Sowing the seeds for amnesia and entering a trance when drawing. Me, starting to tell a true story to seed what is to come in the session. As I do, I look down. So while I'm doing this session, whenever I'm looking down, that's when I'm kind of talking to them consciously, as it were. And then when I give commands, I look up at them. You know, when I was a kid, I used to like watching, I can't remember the name of the program now. That Rolf Harris, I turn to face the client, drawing. Keep facing the client, but move my head down, my head position. Kids program that was on CITV, which is a children's TV kind of channel. It's children's ITV, essentially, for those who don't know. The client, Rolf's Cartoon Club, D. Yeah, something like that. I look down again. He used to have that and I was drawing circles with my arm and finger, looking back at the client, circular desk thing. C, doing an impression of Rolf Harris. D, looking down again. And I look back at the client, got the book of that looking down again. I don't know how I don't know what happened to it. I don't know how, and I don't know what happened to it. It's not like me to lose a book. But I, looking back at the client, always wanted to draw rule for rule, drawing in the air again. The client, yes. I now use a true story to begin to plant the idea of automatic drawing. I also want the client to have amnesia for much of the session so that later they don't try to review everything that I was doing. This specific client has considerable experience with using hypnosis, so I want to make sure they don't analyze the session too much when they come out of hypnosis. I also want to tell a story that lays down the pattern of the session we're in now, where I want the client to start off more conscious and then the unconscious can take over more. I also have chosen to use a story based on being a child of about 8 years old, because that way the client will begin to make associations unconsciously with when they were about 8. And this will cause a slight regression and will change the client's beliefs and opinions of what is possible. As an 8-year-old, almost anything is possible. I'm still continuing to embed suggestions and ideas while I'm telling the story. I'm drawing in the air, like automatic drawing taking place, and putting emphasis on the words I am saying while I do this, so that the client knows that these parts are important. And in the book, gesturing where the book is, so it's hypothetically kind of gesturing, it tells you how to draw it. But I could never draw it. I could never get it to look like the one Rolf Harris, looking at the client, draws, drawing in the air again, looking away. And I was 8 or something. Didn't matter how hard I tried to draw it, it never looked like the one Rolf Harris draws. Then one day, I was in the lounge trying to draw it, drawing in the air again, kept failing. Well, not failing, I kept drawing, but not doing a good job. So I sort of gave up and still had the paper and still had the pen on me and was watching something else. And then I thought, yeah, let's draw it again. Mimic going to draw. A car alarm goes off outside. Then I got distracted by the TV. I can't remember what I was watching now, but it distracted me, and I suddenly thought, cool, I'll watch that. Didn't even think. It was one of those things where, if you put an action movie on, like Die Hard or something, and not a lot is happening, so you're happy to read or do whatever, and then all of a sudden you hear some action happening, and so you look up at the screen and think, cool. And so I looked up at the screen, but my hand kept drawing, and I looked back down, and like the cinema thing, you can be eating popcorn and sometimes something exciting happens, and all of a sudden your hand freezes in front of your mouth because you're more concerned about gesturing in front of me and looking in front of me to be congruent than gesturing holding a piece of popcorn in front of my mouth. What is going on TV? And all of a sudden that finishes and you carry on putting the food in your mouth, and I gesture doing this as if the interruption never happened. But what happened was my hand didn't stop. So when I was interrupted and I looked up, my hand continued to draw. And I looked down at a perfect roll for Roo, and I was really proud, except that it surprised me because I couldn't do it. Simulating trying to draw. Never mind how hard I tried to draw it. I couldn't draw it, and it took me by surprise because I did it without looking, so I didn't know where anything was. So I shouldn't have been able to get the eyes in the right place, and I didn't know where the paper was. And people touch type, and they can see where all the keys are. They can get their fingers to the right keys. They can't see it at all. They can do it with their eyes closed. And people play the piano the same, and people play the piano blind, like Stevie Wonder. So obviously, it's possible for your body to know things that you don't know. Like my granddad plays the piano without looking at the keyboard. And it's just one of those things. So granddad can play the piano and not look at the keys. Could probably play in his sleep. And it's always fascinated me. I've I've never learned to touch type, but I can now type to some extent without looking at the keys, as long as I don't consciously make the effort not to look at the keys. If I just glance up at the screen, I can keep my fingers going, acting out typing without looking at my fingers. If I consciously think, oh, I've been typing without looking at my hands, all of a sudden I'm pressing all the wrong buttons trying to type. As the story continues, I talk about how trying hard can lead to failure, or at least not getting the success you want. This is important because trying is a conscious process, and generally, the harder you try, the harder something seems to become. In the same way that if you try to fall asleep, you struggle and stay awake. And if you try to stay awake, you fall asleep. What I want is for the client to just do, not try. When a car alarm went off outside, I decided to incorporate this into what I was saying. So I spoke at that point of the distraction that gets your attention for a little while. I then continued to parallel the alarm by saying about an action film like Die Hard and hearing something happening that gets your attention. While I told this piece, I suggested amnesia and also suggested it being a positive distraction by interpreting the distraction in my story as cool. I then talk about the hand continuing to draw while I'm distracted, partly because I want this process to happen in the client when he draws, but also because if the alarm keeps going off or goes off again, I want the client to be still responding on an unconscious level, regardless of external distractions. I create frustration in the story so that the client would become more focused on what I was saying. I spoke about how my hand continued moving. And then I ended that piece at an and before changing to talk about being in a cinema. What this does is part of the client stays focused on looking for completion of the pattern or story. And while that is happening, the client enters a slightly deeper trance, giving me the opportunity, while they're partially listening and partially focusing on waiting for the end of the story, to continue to embed the idea of amnesia that I've been embedding already, and also metaphorically commenting that the car alarm has stopped now. I then carry on telling the story to convey the message that while the conscious mind is occupied with one thing, the unconscious mind can work on something else. I then give different examples of being able to do things without conscious attention. Each example is true and undeniable, which helps to convey the message that what we're doing is also possible. I use these stories to convey the message of not paying conscious attention, but pleasantly surprised by what the unconscious has done, which also contains the message that the conscious won't be a part of the process. Towards the end of the story, I start to separate conscious and unconscious by leaning slightly in one direction when talking about the unconscious mind, and the other direction when talking about the conscious mind. I say, it's possible for your body to know things that you don't know. And as I say this, I spatially mark out with my leaning the body knowing and the mind not knowing. I continue to seed the idea of doing things in a trance by talking about how my granddad could probably play piano in his sleep. I also suggest that conscious interference can stop this working just by having that conscious awareness. What is wanted is to just be in the moment and let it happen without thinking about it. Let me just see if there's any questions at this point. I've not tried for years and years and years. And technically, nowadays, I wouldn't have told this story to the client as a way of doing this because of certain outcomes. Um, it depends. So Milton Erickson used to use the early learning set to try to remind people of a time before they learned to give up. So he would talk about how, as a child, you would learn to walk, you'd learn to talk, you'd learn to write, you'd learn to do all these things, but you would fail thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of times, but you would never give up. You would be intensely curious. So you'd reach across your head and touch your ears, and you'd put your foot in your mouth, and you do all these things to figure out where you are in the world and what parts are you and what parts aren't you. And you would explore the world with intense curiosity. And so, obviously, to stimulate the kind of neurology associated with all that, you start talking about those sort of things. You kind of help to take someone back to a mindset, a time when they had that kind of mindset of effortless learning, so to speak. So although it took you failed thousands of times, it was still effortless learning. You still just got on with it. You learned an entire language without any lessons. Whereas pretty much everyone has experienced sitting in school being taught a foreign language and struggling to master that foreign language. Yet you did actually master an entire language with no language as a basis for trying to master that language on. Um, so you can use regression as a way of just sort of accessing a certain type of mindset. So that regression could have been to just say it was about confidence. It could have been to a time you're confident a week ago or a month ago or whatever. But there are specific ages where you just had a slightly different, most people had a slightly different outlook on life or attitude towards life. Um, because consciously you don't actually really do anything. Um, that's the main difficulty. That, as I've obviously talked before, and I talked when I read my first of these books, your conscious awareness is the last part to find anything out, so to speak. Information comes in to your senses, that then gets processed by the deeper parts of your brain, and that leads to you starting to form how you're going to respond to the world before you consciously have any involvement in any of this. So, all of the deeper part, your sort of consciousness, so to speak, or being conscious of things, is all in the higher cortex. So by the time it gets to there, as a whole being, you've already decided how you're going to respond. So when you try and consciously do something, consciousness can direct your attention. Consciousness can help you do time traveling. So what I mean by that is it can help you to um, see how things could pan out in the future. Whereas if you don't have consciousness, you're just always living in the moment. And there are obviously problems that can come with that. But it can help you to, the ideas around consciousness are that it helps you to time travel, it helps you to um, start to get a sense that different people or different animals, perhaps, if you take it back to kind of lower levels, sort of other life or even lower levels of consciousness, like you might get in, say, a rat or something even smaller. Um, but the consciousness, the sort of conscious awareness, is the last part to know. So by the time you're trying to force yourself to do something by putting in effort, as a whole being, you already are in a process of doing something one way. It's very hard to consciously influence your own body in that way. Um, I frequently in my stories don't finish sentences. I move on, and yeah. Obviously, one question would be how many people, when they watch the video, notice that the car alarm went off. because it's loud enough to hear on video. So, where am I? So back to the transcript. Client, that sucks, yeah, but you're right. You get a similar sort of feeling, like when you're trying to draw a copy of something and it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. I'd like to, I know, say, get a Disney video and be able to just put it on the side and just copy the video. That would be cool. I know people that can do that really, really well. And I can't understand why they can do it and I can't. Me, yes. So it's possible, obviously, for your body to do things that you don't have an awareness of. And obviously, consciously, you can take in a certain amount of information, or at least you don't take it in, you take it in unconsciously, and you're drip fed a certain little amount of it at a time, and a very small amount of information. So you don't notice the fine detail. You don't really you just let the hand do what it's doing. Then it doesn't really matter what your conscious mind is thinking. What's on your conscious mind? Because your hand can just do it. Anyway, that was just an aside. So, you haven't been in a deep trance for a while? Client, no. In response to hearing my story, the client agrees with what I've said and then states a goal that he would like, that he would demonstrate success. He also says that he knows people that can do what he wants to do, which means he knows that it can be done. He also states that consciously he doesn't know how to do this. We're hoping to get him doing this without conscious awareness of how he does it. We just want him to do it. My response to his statement was to focus on the unconscious process we're laying down and to link it back with him. He had spoken about other people. I wanted it to be him that has these abilities. So I speak about his body doing things the conscious mind has no awareness of. Again, I do this by marking out the conscious and unconscious so that when I talk to different locations, he'll know I'm communicating with him on a conscious level or an unconscious level. I then very clearly state what will be expected, that he will notice fine detail, and that what his conscious mind is doing has no relevance on his unconscious mind drawing, as long as the conscious mind just lets it happen, unhindered. I use the term obviously to convey the meaning that this is common knowledge. Everyone knows this. This is to depotentiate any resistance by using a term that's unlikely to be questioned. Generally, people don't question something that they feel they should know, and they often just let it go in because you're not asking for a response. When I work with smokers, I often do similar. I'll say, obviously, you know all the dangers of smoking, so I'm not going to tell you that. And then I go on to list all the dangers without receiving resistance because I've framed the statement as just telling them what I'm not going to tell them. So now I do the induction. There was something I wanted to do, and the question is, do I do it now or do I not? But I might give it a go. Client, okay, looking confused. I mentioned the induction I'm going to do in this way, as the client has been hypnotized by me before, and I didn't want him to know what to expect. I wanted to begin to indirectly hypnotize him. The only way for the client to respond to what I said was for him to go inside his mind to wonder what I'm thinking of doing and be confused because of not knowing what to expect. Most effective inductions have an element of confusion to disrupt the conscious mental set, as the only way to respond to confusion is to try to find a way out, which will either be following a clear suggestion by the hypnotherapist or by going inside their own mind to escape that confusion. Only because it's just something different for a change. Client, nice day for a change. Me, yep, I was thinking exactly the same thing. Right, put your hand on my hand. Okay, in a minute I'm going to tell you to push down. Now, I don't want this to surprise you. So I'm going to tell you in advance what's going to happen. Client, all right. I mentioned something different for a change so that the client would think of the sentence, nice day for a change, which implies change happening. I also imply that because I'm doing something different, that will create the changes we will get in this session. I tell the client what to do at the start of the induction. I'll be doing what to do at the start of the induction I'll be doing with him. And even though I'm about to do a very direct induction, I still use indirect methods. I tell him I don't want the induction to surprise him, and that because of this, I will tell him in advance what will happen. I could have just told him directly. When I do this, you'll go into a trance like this. But he may have chosen to resist me if I did that. So by framing it that I'm telling him for his benefit so that he knows what to expect, he's more likely to listen to hear what's going to happen, rather than feeling that he's been told what to do and feeling manipulated. I then change direction so that he doesn't have too long to analyze what I've just said, in case he picks it apart and realizes what I'm doing. I don't just change to any old subject. I change to the issue of trance, getting some agreement, creating some confusion, and again, getting the client to recall a previous trance so that when I start the induction, he's already partially in the recalled trance and mildly confused, making him more receptive, and has agreed with me a few times, enhancing his receptivity and making him more likely to continue to accept what I say. And you don't mind going into a deep trance, do you? Nope. You really don't mind? No. To make these sentences more powerful and less likely to be resisted, I've used the reverse yes set. The reverse yes set is where you get a no, but it's still in agreement with what you've said. By framing the questions negatively, the client is less likely to feel the need to disagree. By asking you really don't mind, the client is likely to go inside their mind wondering if there's supposed to be a reason to mind. So this causes slight confusion for the client, because why would they mind? While they're inside their mind searching previous trance experiences to make sense of the question and see if any previous deep trance experience should lead them to a different answer, they're putting themselves into a deeper trance just before I start the actual induction. What's the deepest trance you've ever been into? Maybe the one where you lost track of time, although you knew exactly what the time was because you came out of trance at the right time. Right, what I'm going to do is to tell you to look into my eyes. Not yet. So what I'm going to do is to tell you to push down on my hand. Client starts pushing. In a minute, client's laughing. And then when I say sleep, clicking my fingers, sleep. And do it your own way. You can get relaxed, feet up, head down, your choice. You can slump, do whatever you want. However you want to go into it. Okay? You happy with that? Yep. I then immediately ask, what's the deepest trance you've been into? And then begin to describe a trance experience, suggesting that the client can go into a deep trance where he stops paying attention to conscious references like keeping track of time, where he can just be in each moment, and that he can come fully back when he's supposed to. I do this to keep the client occupied with thoughts of being in a trance. He's already partially recalling a trance experience from the last questions I asked. Now he'll be beginning to recall a specific deep trance experience. I jump straight to describing what will happen with the current induction. All of this jumping around keeps some confusion there and keeps the client frustrated, needing to become reliant on me for clues about how he's supposed to be, what he's supposed to be doing. The client demonstrates that he's already becoming very receptive by responding literally to my descriptions. He looks into my eyes when I mentioned it and pushes down on my hand when I mentioned that. Right, push down on my hand. Really hard. Push harder. Keep pushing harder, harder. Keep pushing harder and harder. Push down harder, harder. Look into my eyes. Keep pushing down harder and harder and harder, harder and harder. Client, I can't. Keep pushing harder and harder. Close your eyes and sleep. The induction is a typical rapid induction. It's done very directly and forcibly. While I'm doing this induction, I'm closely watching the client. I'm watching his face and shoulders, looking for changes that will signal that he's gone inside his mind, because it's at this point that I want to give the command to go inside his mind and sleep. After about 30 seconds, the client says just audibly, "I can't." It's at this point that I want to offer him a first suggestion to sleep. When he says he can't, he has almost given up trying. He's become slightly confused as to how he can push harder if he's pushing as hard as he can. When people are confused, they'll usually accept any firm suggestion, so long as it doesn't go against their personal values. In this induction, that is when I say, just once more, keep pushing harder and harder, just to add to the confusion. Then I say firmly and directly, close your eyes and sleep, at the same time as clicking my fingers, which will trigger the orientation response, which is the response that gets fired to alert us to a stimulus, making someone focus on just one thing. This fires as we enter dreams, which is what can give the sensation of fooling. It also, I also pull my hand out from under his, which causes shock, creating a trance state. With the shock from the click and from the hand being removed, and with the confusion and the direct command, the client was very unlikely to not go into a deep trance. The client slumps back into the chair, as if all his muscles have relaxed and his arms fall to his lap. Yeah, using the term obviously. I obviously use that quite frequently. With him specifically, I it's a very common hypnotic technique where the fact that words have multiple meanings or different meanings in different contexts, it's very common that therapists will say things like, for example, a client will come into a therapy office, especially here in the UK, and if the weather is even slightly nice, then a very good thing you can do is, as soon as you greet that client, is say "nice day for a change," and you say it meaning today is a nice day to change your behaviors. But how you sort of they take it in relation is often in relation to the weather, that it's sunny for a change and so it's a nice day for a change. But so that's why he thought of that, because obviously he's trained as a therapist. I knew that he also really likes using that sentence, just like I like using "nice day for a change" as a sentence with clients when I meet them. Um, or if I meet them on Skype or whatever, if I know that they're from the UK and I know that the weather is actually nice for a change, I would utilize that observation and say, "It's a nice day for a change," meaning it's a nice day for, meaning change is going to happen today, um, to do therapeutically. So he knows that, I know that. Obviously, if someone, you sort of mentioned, I don't like change. If someone kind of in therapy didn't like change, it's not about that. It's not focusing on that element of it. It's that consciously they just answer, "Yes, it is. It's sunny," or whatever. But non-consciously they understand that sentence also as all the different meanings that can have. In the same way that if someone says the word "run," you you in your head have every pattern for the word "run" stimulated, but consciously you only need to be aware of the one that matches the context that it's in. So let's just run through these reports. Consciously you just interpret the word "run" as meaning we're going to look through what's written down here, but non-consciously that word, every meaning for it has now been stimulated. And so if the person was there for weight loss, then the ideas around weight loss and running would also link together, because that's why they're there. what you say as a therapist is supposed to be therapy, so it must be linked to that as well. Um, but that's why I knew that he specifically would think of nice day for a change, telling himself that it's a nice day for a change. With someone else, I might have said that on them arriving and meeting me at the door or something. Might have seen it was sunny and just say nice day for a change as I shake hands with them or something. Um, no, it's no trickier. Um, it's no trickier to hypnotize someone who's trained. It's just you do different things, so they might appreciate um, certain things you do more than someone else might appreciate it. So you might do certain things on purpose um, because you know that they'll really appreciate that specific type of technique, or because you know maybe say they were like me, no one ever hypnotizes them, and they think, oh, I wish people would hypnotize me. No one ever does it, and so you do something that maybe they don't normally have happen to them. Um, so obviously anyone at all could pick things apart, um, and so you might do things to create certain sort of amnesia or whatever, but largely you don't worry too much about that. You just think, let things happen as they happen. If this person's here for therapy, then they're not going to be over analyzing, trying to pick things apart necessarily. But there is a tendency, for example, uh, that somebody could think they want to learn from the experience as well. So they might want to pick things apart to learn from. And so you might want to intentionally give them things to pick apart that have no relevance to anything, or very little relevance to things, so that they can spend their time picking those things apart and analyzing those things, and then missing the little bits that you did elsewhere. Um, you could have them focusing on their breathing to reduce distraction. I explained all that in the Introduction to Hypnotherapy book, um, about the orientation response, about how that's fired continuously all day. Every time there's any new information coming in, it fires to alert you, to kind of focus you on new information, new information, new information. There's a new sound here, there's a new that there. Um, so it fires all day long, and it fires when you go to sleep. And then when you go to start dreaming, as you transition into your sort of dreaming sleep, you get that fire of electricity sort of thing up the back of your neck almost, up through the pons, geniculo, occipital parts of the brain, and that can suddenly give you a feeling of falling, like a hypnagogic jerk. Um, so yeah, so it's just that. Um, so all I'm doing is when I move my hand, there's that sudden, oh, your attention suddenly focused on this sudden change that's occurred. When I snap my fingers, your attention's also, physically you've got something, auditorily you've got something, your attention suddenly focused on that snap at the same time, and you've then been told to close your eyes and sleep, and you interpret that in the context of hypnosis as not falling asleep but entering hypnosis. So it's a nice quick simple term to use, and then essentially the person drops into that kind of state. You can have an obviously drinking game. Yeah, there's often multiple meanings in things I say. So you mentioning there, you find yourself on holiday. That could also be you discover yourself, like you find your answers, etc. Um, like I went away to find myself. So there's multiple ways that people can interpret that. That'll be unique to them, but there are some that are kind of common to most people. Um, so trance deepener. Um, I'm going to tell you this bit, but I don't know if I've written in here the fact that after, and if I have, then you're about to hear it twice. The fact that if you watch the video, you can see I sit down nearly straight away. I literally just click my finger, say sleep, and then I sit down. And I think I look at my chair just for a second, just to make sure I know where my backside has to go. And then I sit down. And afterwards, he said, "Why did I pause for so long?" Like he felt that I paused for a very, very long time between saying sleep and carrying on talking. So saying this next bit. If I had known that he'd already gone that deep, if I'd picked that up, I wouldn't have even bothered with this next bit because there would be no need. He's already incredibly deep. He's already so deep that he's completely lost track of time, as we'd kind of already been priming for the idea of him losing track of time. He's already been there, done that, responded incredibly well. But when you're looking at the person, all you see is that they're stationary. They've followed along to what you've said, but you've got no guarantee that they're staying there, if that makes sense. You've got no guarantee that they're not going to suddenly think, "Oh, what just happened?" and then come straight back out. So that's why I obviously carried on doing deepening. That's one shot. But if I had known that, I wouldn't have had to necessarily have carried on. That's it. Just allow yourself to go down deeper and deeper. That's it. Deeper and deeper. Just taking deep breaths. That's it. That's it. I now deepen the trance very directly by telling the client to go down deeper and deeper and saying that's it on the client's out breaths. I also say just taking deep breaths. The reason for this was that by saying just implies he is only going to be taking breaths, not any other type of breaths. Only taking deep breaths, not any other type of breaths. And in a moment, I'm going to lift up that hand, looking over at the client's hands. And when I do, I'm not going to tell you to put it down any faster. That's it. Then your unconscious mind begins, that's it, to get a sense of what it's like to walk down a flight of stairs. I continue to frustrate responses to help continue to deepen the trance by being ambiguous, not telling the client which hand I will lift, by saying in a moment, not specifying exactly when. I tell the client indirectly that I want him to do an arm levitation by telling him that I'm not going to tell you to put it down, which obviously means keep it up. I follow this up with any faster, which implies that it will lower by itself, which, as the sentence continues, links the lowering with the unconscious walking downstairs. I continue to say that's it on each out breath by the client as I'm still deepening the trance. So I want to use everything to do this. So this is something that you wouldn't get in my sleep meditations, because I can't respond to you as an individual. But this is what you would get if you were face to face with me, is that halfway through a sentence, if I saw you breathing, I would respond to that breathing. So, I'm talking kind of while you're breathing out generally. And in this case, I'm making sure I talk whether he's breathing in or out, because I want to make sure that, because with shock inductions, especially, people sometimes have a tendency to think, "Oh, what just happened?" and come straight back up again. So you have to kind of treat it as that person might be shocked, surprised, and think, "Oh, what just happened? Am I being manipulated?" And so you've got to keep them comfortable and keep them accepting this is a perfectly fine thing, you're okay, etc. So in this case, I'm talking whether he's breathing in or out. So what I'm doing instead is every time he breathes out, I'll stop mid that's it sentence and carry and just say that's it like that. Mid sentence. I don't care whereabouts in the sentence it is. Once there's an out breath, I just interrupt my own sentence with saying that's it, and sometimes other words like all the way or whatever. And I'm not going to know where those stairs are. I'm not going to know whether they're in a building or whether they're going down to a garden. That's it. Or down to a beach. Only you know. That's it. Where those steps are. I emphasize me not knowing, as this implies someone must know. And if it isn't me, it must be the client. I then tell him that he knows. I find that often it's best to indirectly imply something and lay down a pattern before saying something directly, so that you're constantly communicating on two levels, one with implication and metaphor and patterns, and the other being direct and able to be understood consciously. Even if I'm talking to the unconscious mind, I know the conscious mind is listening to some extent, so it needs to have a message to follow that seems straightforward enough to not feel a need to analyze too much. Likewise, when I'm talking to the conscious mind, I know the unconscious is listening. Obviously, conscious mind and unconscious mind are just concepts and not real. Contingent suggestions, compound suggestions, and nominalizations. And the conscious part of you that is normally at the front of your mind can just distract itself in some way as you go down those stairs, and it can find its own way of becoming more and more distracted with each step it takes. Contingent suggestions are suggestions where two parts of a communication are linked with an action phrase like before, during, after, while, as. The two parts don't have to genuinely be linked or relate to each other. In the sentence above, I link the conscious mind becoming more distracted with walking down the stairs in the mind, even though there's no real link other than me saying as. I also include a compound suggestion. Compound suggestions have two parts of a communication linked with an and or a pause. They imply that because the first part happens, so will the second part. In the sentence above, I use and to link the going down the stairs with becoming more and more distracted. In effect, I'm saying the same thing twice in the same sentence using two different language patterns. In this sentence, there is also the implication or presupposition that the client will be walking down the stairs and that he'll be consciously distracted. The first half of the sentence was saying the conscious part can distract itself. The second half was about how this distraction will happen. The idea behind this is that the client is now more likely to focus on the how rather than whether the distraction will happen or not. There is also the implication that the client is in a different state, and things that happen in this state are different to normal waking state, by emphasizing normally, implying that this isn't normally. There are also many nominalizations just in this one sentence. Nominalizations are words with no fixed meaning. The listener makes up their own meaning when they hear the words. From the start, every session is full of nominalizations by the client and therapist. In the sentence above, there is normally, own way, conscious part of you, front of your mind, distract itself, those stairs, no description of the stairs, more, doesn't specify how much more, so the client has to figure that out. Me. And your unconscious mind that's normally at the back, separating conscious unconscious with change in tonality, change in position of my voice is coming from, can come to the front. And you can have an overwhelming sense of fully moving to the front with each step. That's it. And the unconscious part of you can increase in awareness of me, of what I say, of the way that I say things, of tonality, subtle changes, and can really fully become aware in the front of your mind, to the front of your mind. Throughout the induction, I'm using the word and to make sure that every part is linked. I'm separating the conscious and unconscious as I talk to the client, so that just by talking in a specific way and having my voice coming from a specific location, the client will know whether I'm talking to their conscious or unconscious mind or both. I'm continuing to embed suggestions and commands to help the client's unconscious mind become more responsive to the way I'm communicating, to pick up on the marked out communication, including communication that is targeted at the unconscious mind, like metaphors and stories. Your unconscious mind won't be completely to the back of your mind until you reach the 10th step. That's it. And as the unconscious part of you won't completely be at the front of your mind, won't completely take over awareness until you reach the 10th step. And you can be curious to discover what is at the bottom of those stairs. That's right. That's it. I lift up the right arm, and that arm can lower down only at the rate and speed that you go deeper. And you won't go all the way down into a deep, comfortable trance until the arm goes all the way down. That's it. All the way down. That's it. That's it. The arm has lowered now. The main purpose of the steps is as a deepener and to create greater separation between what is coming up, which is the laying down of the patterns for improved artistic abilities, and the initial conscious thinking. Normally, when people use steps, they count the client down the steps. This relies on the client going at the speed the therapist sets. By doing the arm levitation, I have a signal that I can visually observe that's linked to the client going down deeper at the speed they choose. I continue to use negative phrasing, saying you won't until. This generally creates less resistance and is slightly harder for the client, especially when they're relaxed, to unpick and analyze. Using negatives in this way, people often hear the first part of the sentence. For example, you won't go all the way down into a deep and comfortable trance state. And if they're going to resist, they often respond by doing it now and responding opposite to the statement. It's like a reverse double bind, in that they can resist and respond now, or they can follow the suggestion and respond when they're asked to. The issue is about time, not about whether they'll do what they've been asked to do or not. It takes a lot for a client to then unpick the sentence and decide they'll actually ignore it completely and not do anything. They're far more likely to choose to go against the therapist and do it now, or go with the therapist and do it when they're supposed to. Most people in therapy have made a commitment to be there to receive help, so doing nothing when asked to is often not on their mind. When they have an alternative to feel a sense of control, whatever other needs they would meet by going against a therapist. And you can wonder where you're going to wander next. And somewhere there, you can discover a painting. And I don't know what that painting will be of, and what it is that it can teach you something about yourself. Now that the client has reached the bottom of the steps, I had a little confusion by using words that sound similar, with one talking about things and one about action. I use many nominalizations as I don't know where they are going to be in their mind. And because I don't know where the painting that I want in their mind is going to be, I don't tell them where it is. I give them the option to discover it. I keep using the word and to continually compound end statement, to compound statements on previous statements, so that they build on each other. In many sessions, I've observed people will say things like, and in front of you, in front of you, you will see a picture. If the person can see in front of themselves in their mind's eye before you've said that, and there was no picture, then you'll mismatch their internal reality. By suggesting wonder and somewhere, it leaves the painting to be found. I also state a truism. I don't know what that painting will be of. This is undeniable, with the implication that they must know. Being a truism, they agree with they again will agree with me. It is also followed with a poorly formed sentence. I run one sentence into the next using the word "it can teach you" to transition from the end of a sentence with one meaning saying what it is that it can teach you, then continuing the sentence, giving a suggestion of what I want that painting to teach. It can teach you something about yourself. There is so much going on in the sentence with thinking about the one wandering, finding a painting, hearing truisms, then create agreement, that to also keep track of the final embedded command is difficult. It just sinks in because analyzing that as well takes considerable effort. Just seeing if there's anything in there. And there can be something curious about the painting. And as you pay all your attention to me, so you can notice the things that I say and the things that I do. And perhaps it'll be the way that I say things. That's it. And I wonder what it is that's curious about that painting. I'm continuing with many nominalizations and vague phrases like curious, attention, things that I say, things that I do, way that I say things, wonder. These help to keep the client on an inner search for their own meaning to what I'm saying and doing. I sandwich the paying attention to me and emphasizing to the client that there is something important in what I'm saying and doing between two statements about being curious about the painting. This is partly to create amnesia for the paying attention. I want the client to unconsciously be responsive to me, but feel that these bits haven't been said, that they were just listening to me talking about the painting. Open-ended suggestions. Could it be that movement? And I wonder where that movement is, and whether it's a little bit of movement or a lot of movement, and whether that movement is in the center or off the sides or around the edges. And I wonder what type of movement it is, whether it's the sort of wavy movement or a swirly movement or some other kind of movement, and whether it has a 3D effect or a 2D effect. While the client's paying attention to the painting, I want to generate movement. I don't want to mismatch the client's inner reality, which could include movement or no movement in the painting. I decide to be fairly strong on saying that there is movement. So I say that there is movement, but because I know the client could be seeing a still image, I want to cover all bases with suggestions that lead to the movement being there, but perhaps not at first observed. I mention the location and give the option for it being a little bit or a lot, and the type of movement. I don't want to give chance for the client to stop and think there is no movement. So I say all of these options in fairly quick succession. I'm always implying there is definitely movement there, even if at first it was so small it wasn't noticed until I mentioned it. That's it. And you can be curious to pay attention to whether there are sounds there, and perhaps they're coming from the picture or from elsewhere, maybe behind you or in front of you, or to the left or to the right, or from above or maybe below. That's it. That's it. That's it. This is a technique I use quite often, where I'll suggest an idea as if any possibility is an option, and then follow a preferred route. For example, above I suggest paying attention to see if there are sounds there, giving the choice that there may be silence. But before the client has time to think about it, I suggest that the sounds are there. It's now a question of where they're coming from. I then go on to giving multiple options of where the sounds could be originating. And another curiosity about this picture is that you can step inside this picture. That's it. And I don't know what it is like the other side of the picture. When I said step inside the picture, I could see the client had done that by changes in his physiology, which I acknowledged by saying that's it. I then followed this up by immediately stating a truism that I don't know what is the other side, what it's like the other side of the picture. Again, implying that they do. And for the client to know what it's like, they have to be there. By having the client step into the painting, it takes them even deeper into trance. Anytime you have someone change where they are in their mind, they go deeper and layer their trance experience so that the last place they gets sandwiched between the previous places, which are sandwiched between the places before that, etc. This leads to usually spontaneously getting amnesia for the deeper parts of the trance. So, I can't remember. I would have to watch the video back and see if the video is of enough quality for me to see. Um, it would have been just some physiological change that I'd noticed that meant that it was at the right time that he was responding. Um, so it could have been anything. It could have been like, you know, a sudden change in his face color, or a sudden change in his breathing, or a sudden twitch, and maybe a change in his shoulders or something. Um, so whatever it was, I didn't see it as important enough to write it down in the book. Um, it was just me noticing that there was a significant change in his physiology at that exact moment in time. So as I say, I don't know if it's visible on the video, because the video's from further back to try and get the two of us in it, and it's in the days where I was recording stuff onto cassette tapes. Yep, you are essentially doing nested loops. You're kind of sandwiching something in place. So the idea is, it's like there's one level there, and then you go down here, you do something here, and then you come back and you carry on there, and then that little bit down here kind of gets sandwiched and forgotten, because they remember that bit. They remember walking through the woods and falling asleep in front of a tree. They don't remember the dream, and then they remember waking up under the tree and carrying on with their journey. It's very unlikely to be a coincidence when you're kind of this far in and you suggest something. Like if I suggest you can head forward into the experience, and then a few minutes later you see their head gently nod, you know that that's very unlikely to have been random, given they could have done that randomly literally at any point during the session, and they happen to do it at the point that you suggested it. Likewise, it's very unlikely if someone's doing the same behaviors, showing the same kind of breathing, they're relaxed, they're in one state, and then you change what you talk about, and then at that point, what you're always looking for in hypnosis is changes. So if you ask someone something, or you want someone to go deeper, or whatever you're asking, you're looking for evidence of that, physiological evidence that something has shifted. When you do just idiodynamic healing, which obviously I've written a chunk of the book for it, but I haven't released the book for it yet. It's probably my favorite area of ways of working. This is all you do for the entire thing. Literally, you'd sit opposite someone, you'd sort of ask them, to start getting on with some inner work. And when you notice a change, you would acknowledge that, right, something has shifted within you. Your physiology has now changed. Your face has got redder or paler. Your lips have changed in some way. Your pulse has just changed. Your breathing has just changed. Maybe it's got shallower or deeper. Maybe it's the rhythm has changed. You notice a change, and you then acknowledge that. That's it, going all the way, or having the strength to work through that, or whatever words you use. You trust that it's part of what they're supposed to be doing. And so that's what it is here, that you've asked someone to do something that should come with physiological changes, because they are doing something different to what they were doing a moment ago. And so when you ask them to do that, they go and do it, and you obviously then acknowledge that they've been there, and they're now there. They're now in that next step. That's it. Normally that conscious part of you guides your decisions, guides what you do, what you're thinking about. It's a bit like a driver of a train. The driver's just a small part of the whole thing, and the driver can just see what is outside his window. And the driver knows that there are 8 carriages behind, and the driver knows that each of those carriages is full of people, and that each of those people are saying their own things and doing their own things, and each of those people are in control of what they're in control of. Some are reading newspapers, some are listening to music, and some are planning ideas, and many of them are lost in thought. That's it. Yet all the driver is aware of, even though the driver knows all of that is there, is what's through that window. I've used a metaphor to parallel the conscious mind by having the conscious mind as the driver of a train and the passengers as neurons that are all doing their own things, independent of the driver. People consciously know that their mind is doing lots of things at once, that they have no awareness of, and that all they're aware of is what they consciously are currently aware of, like the driver only being able to see out of the window. I'm conveying this message as a metaphor, as this is an easier way to lay down a pattern for the unconscious mind to use. Me again? That's it. Whereas the unconscious part of you is like a super being floating above the train, like Superman flying above the train, where he can see the passengers because he can see through the walls, because he can see what they're all doing. He can notice their behaviors, their language. He can fly down and talk to them. He can even make them change their behaviors. He can ask someone to stop reading their newspaper, and they would stop. He could ask someone to stop listening to music, and they would stop. He could interrupt someone having a conversation, and they'd forget what it was that they were talking about. To describe the unconscious mind, I use the term super being, as it has many positive connotations. I describe some of the strengths of the unconscious mind and what it can influence by talking about how it can influence the passengers. The idea I want to convey is that a conscious knowing and an unconscious doing are 2 different things. I want the client to be able to just do on an unconscious level. Post-hypnotic suggestion. That's it. Now you can be curious as to how you are going to use all of your unconscious resources, how you're going to use all of your talents you've got that are normally held back behind the doors of the conscious part. You can be curious about what the improvements will be, how your mind and your curiosity of your brain will make aspects of the improvements permanent in a comfortable way. That's it. That's it. And you can get a sense of what it's like to see you in your mind, to see you in the future. There's an implication running through this section. When you use implication or presuppositions, they act like post-hypnotic suggestions. By saying you are going to and will, it is placing what I'm saying in the future as a certainty rather than a possibility. I follow the suggestions up by building on each preceding suggestion. I firstly state what will happen in the future. Then I move on to seeing you in your mind. Then on to a context for that you that's being seen in the future. If I didn't add that the client could see themselves at any age and at any time, even made up ages and times. If I didn't add that, the client could see themselves at any age, at any time, even made up ages and times, like into the distant past or a futuristic world. I want to keep what I say as unthreatening as possible, so I build one thing onto another, hoping to go just slightly faster than the client's awareness of what I'm suggesting, so that I'm leading their internal reality now. In the same way that you can wear glasses and not notice until someone mentions them, I want the client to assume they've just not noticed something until I mentioned it, rather than it not previously being a part of their reality. Me. And you remember Super Ted? So, Super Ted, for all of those of you out there who um, don't know who Super Ted is, Super Ted was a little teddy bear who could would say a magic word to himself, and then he'd rip his fur off, and he'd be wearing a superhero suit, and then he'd go and save the day. That's who Super Ted was. I used to watch the cartoon all the time, and still would if it was on. You've never heard of? Go and check out Super Ted. See the intro to Super Ted. It'll all make sense. And as soon as you've done that, then obviously I can continue. So, and you remember Super Ted? Super Ted used to say his magic word, and he would change from an ordinary teddy bear into a super teddy bear. And consciously, you've watched Super Ted, and you could never quite hear the word. You'd never know consciously what the word is, no matter how often you watched it. And you can see yourself, and you can see that you having a code word, and you can watch yourself say that code word to yourself, and you can watch yourself say that code word to yourself. I now use the cartoon character Super Ted to introduce the idea of a code word for triggering the artistic ability. Ideally, I want the code word to be something internal and unconscious, rather than something the client has to consciously say. It's like when a hypnotist sets up the word sleep to re-induce trance. I want the client to have a word to re-induce artistic abilities, but I want it to come from the client's unconscious mind. To cement ideas and reprogramming, I normally give the idea, then have them watch themselves doing the new behavior, then have them go into that version of themselves to experience actually doing what they've just watched themselves do. This is generally a very effective way of getting the behavior into the client's future. It also matches the way people normally do things. They get the information, me giving the idea, then they think about what they're going to do, see themselves doing the behavior. Then they do it, stepping into the future and future them and experiencing it. If you just jump someone into just doing a new behavior, it may not stick because there's no planning or mirroring reality. Also, by doing it this way, if there are any problems with the way they see things go, it can be changed to be just right before they go into the experience. Me. And when you watch yourself becoming overwhelmed by that compulsive artistic ability, and I don't know if it's thousands of times or even tens of thousands of times, or even realistic and lifelike in comparison to how the conscious part of you, that other part of you, does art. That's it. That's it. And you can watch, and I wonder what you see. And I wonder what you see, how well you're doing that art. Does it look haphazard to start with? Like when you watch Rolf Harris, where that other part, the unconscious part, has its own way of drawing, where it takes control. It takes control. And I wonder whether that you reports that it's like the hand doing all of that work themselves. Whether it's like an image just being printed, the hands just get a compulsive feeling. Whether it's like the hands get a compulsive feeling to carry out that artistic talent. I know, yes. Yeah, spotty man. People with natural artistic abilities or people that are naturally talented at anything generally have a high level of compulsion to do what they're interested in. In this section, it's this compulsion that I'm working on installing. I offer lots of ideas about how the compulsiveness will take effect, and that it comes from the unconscious part of the client, not the conscious part. I do this by talking about the hands doing the work, and that the unconscious mind has its own drawing style. The presupposition, though, through all of this is still one of that improved drawing ability taking place. It's now a question of what it will be like to the conscious mind as an observer rather than whether it will happen. I'm also talking to the client as someone that is still observing that future them. They're not yet in that future them, me. And I wonder how long that lasts. Is it for 20 minutes or half an hour, or is it for a full hour? And I wonder whether it ends because you decide it's time to stop, or whether it ends because the time is up. And I wonder how long it lasts. Is it 20 minutes, half an hour, or maybe even a full hour, or somewhere in between? I now limit the duration of that compulsive behavior. I don't want it to carry on indefinitely because that could have negative effects on work and family life. I want the client's unconscious mind to decide the duration. So I offer choices around how long it will last, rather than just telling the client how long it will last. Whenever doing any work with clients, the therapist needs to be mindful of the positive and negative effects of making the change. By having the client view the changes first, it gives them the opportunity to see if the changes are acceptable. If they're not, you've given the client the option to decide not to go into themselves when we get to that stage, and also to make any changes now before they do. It's a bit like starting with hindsight. The client can see if the changes are acceptable from a dissociated position. Being dissociated gives a useful view on things, like watching a football match and knowing a player should have passed because you saw another player open. Yet the player that should have passed wasn't in a position to see what you could see, and so they made a different decision. Me. And like all resources, you can use the skills and talents and you can transfer to other areas. And that's transfer to other areas. That's it. Excellent. And you know what it's like to step inside that you there and experience that deep compulsive desire to create photorealistic artwork. And I wonder what changes happen at a neurological level that are completely comfortable and healthy, that build the talent and increase the talent by temporarily numbing down an area of the brain. And I wonder how that numbing down takes effect. I use the term transfer to imply going into trance to transfer skills and abilities. Shutting down perceptual filters. You can be curious as to whether it'll be like certain signals not being allowed through, or certain signals taking a different route around the brain. Performing those talents with those signals taking different routes to how you perform it consciously. And you can imagine what it is like to be that you there, carrying out that's it, that artistic compulsion. And I wonder what it feels like. Do the hands feel tingly? Or is it the arms? Or is it the back of the neck? I want to generate feelings associated with the specific trance or of improved artistic ability. So I ask what it feels like. Then I tell the client in the next sentence what it will feel like, that it will be a tingling. I then make the focus on where that tingling will be rather than if there will be a tingling or not. I'm also setting up the next part of the session where I want the tingling to be linked to energy. You can be curious as to how that compulsion takes effect once you hear that word. And I don't know whether the word is Leonardo, or whether the word is Raphael, or some other famous artist. That's it. That's it. That's it. And you can go deeper and deeper. And you know what somnambulism is. That's right. And when that artistic desire, compulsion, takes effect, I wonder whether it'll make the fingers twitch with nervous energy, desperate to carry it out, or whether that doesn't show. The self hypnotic suggestion is brought back in again here and linked to the feeling, the energy. I now make the focus on whether the energy will be visible to others or not, rather than if it will be there or not. When I introduce something that I want to be there, I like to make the focus on something to do with that new thing rather than if that new thing will be there or not. And you can imagine in your mind a panel, and it's a panel with many levers on, and each lever is logically labeled. That's it. He moved at that point. And you can imagine turning up that lever to artistic ability, putting it up to full. That's it. That's it. And in a moment, I'm going to lift up your right hand. And when I do, I'm not going to tell you to put it down any faster than you become absorbed in the idea of being a great artist. And I don't know whether it's going to be an artist that is going to be a mixture of many artists, or an artist that's going to be greater than any artist you've ever known. That's it. And I don't know whether your hand coming down will take 2 minutes, 3 minutes, or 5 minutes, or somewhere in between. And I don't know how long it will be on the inside for you. And I wonder what you get up to while that's happening. The client already has the experience of using arm movement to go deeper into a trance, which is becoming more absorbed. I now use it again to becoming absorbed in the idea of becoming a great artist. Again, I introduce an idea, the idea of becoming deeper absorbed. Then I focus attention on time rather than whether the absorption will happen or not, and then change focus to what the conscious mind will be getting up to. And when it's time to come out of a trance and come all the way back to the room, you can come back with the artistic abilities, and I'll let you know when that time is. And I wonder what it will have felt like to have those changes occurred on a deep neurological level. First, changes can occur through all the connections, pathways, circuitry, that's it. And on one level, when you come back, how you can be curious as to where those changes came from and how those changes occurred. The suggestions given here are given very directly that when the client comes out of trance, they'll come back with the artistic abilities. I use the word occurred rather than occur in the middle of a sentence to imply that they have happened. Then I mention a curiosity about where those changes have come from to again change the focus from whether it happens or not to trying to work out where the change came from. Yes, when I was saying it, I was thinking entirely of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That was my choice of saying it. Again, it also brings back the idea. I didn't mention this, but it also brings back the idea of being a child again in his mind. It keeps him in that kind of mindset of being that kind of 8-year-old or whatever. And obviously, Super Ted as well keeps him in that being a child type mindset again. Logically labeled levers, yeah. And I wonder whether you'll be amazed or at least shocked. And you know the studies that have been done by shutting down areas temporarily in a healthy way, whether it's shutting down or just not allowing the signal to get through temporarily from the logical, rational hemisphere, part of the brain, The creative part of the brain, the part that notices fine detail, notices every little thing, notices millions and millions of bits of information every single second. That part of the brain can take control. And then it will end up with you having client moved his arm to scratch. That's it. Many abilities. That's it. That's it. Now, as you're going to achieve great things, that's it. That's it. We want you to take your time to do this. Take your time to do this now. That's it. That's it. I lift the client's arm above his head. That's it. That's it. And on many levels, you can begin to count backwards from 100 and let the unconscious work. That's it. And you know what your right foot feels like. And I wonder if it feels different from the left. That's it. That's it. And your left hand can be left there, lightly resting where it is. And I wonder how your eyelids feel. That's it. That's it. Making this completely. While the client has their arm in the air and is counting down in his mind, I want to jump his attention all over the place to stop him focusing on the lowering arm and the internal unconscious work. That's it. And you know, a minute of my time can seem like a longer time of yours, just like you can experience, that's it. Arm fully came down. A longer time that just goes by from minute to minute. And you can take a minute of my time to go deep and comfortable inside your mind, into a deep and comfortable focused state of mind, and allowing that artistic ability to develop and enhance itself. And the more it enhances itself, the more pleasure you can experience inside your mind. And you can take a minute of total silence to do that now. Minute silence, I just sit and observe minimal cues. I sit and observe and watch for signs of increasing pleasure to see that he's enhancing his abilities. That's it. That's it. And you know you can control blood flow. You can make yourself blush on half your face. And if you get a cut, you can make it so that the blood stops flowing over the cut anymore than is necessary to keep the wound clean. You can make an arm numb or a leg numb or half a head numb. You can increase your metabolism or slow it down. You can alter any system in your body with your mind. To link back with the earlier statement of making part of the brain numb, I sandwiched the suggestion for this again in the middle of a collection of truisms about what the mind is capable of. Now, when it's time for you to open your eyes, I'll ask you again to draw a horse, and again, you'll get 1 minute to do it in. And you can be curious as to how much better that horse will be drawn. Will it be lifelike? Will it be hundreds or thousands of times improved on the last one? How much can you manage to draw in 1 minute? You can be curious as to how much you can draw of that horse in 1 minute and the level of detail you can draw. And you can always keep in mind that ability, those abilities you have. And you can always keep in mind how to get that artistic ability. And you can always keep that in mind. That's it. And you can open your eyes now. My use of the term you can always keep in mind is specifically used because if you always keep something in mind, it means it is always there. It's a post-hypnotic suggestion to make everything stick. Me, now talking normally. Right, want to have a bash at drawing that horse again? We'll see how it goes. Now, help if the pen works. The pen didn't work, so the client had to change pens. 1 minute given to redraw the horse. Time's up. How do you think you did? It looks more like a horse than the last one did. It's more proportionate, I think. Yes, drawing style was different as well. Client starts to carry on drawing. I'm not supposed to be doing this now, am I? No, I'll show this to camera before we if you do start finishing it off or something. So that's the horse that he drew at the end in 1 minute. That's quite different, isn't it? Client picking up the pen again to carry on drawing. And that's only a first thing drawn after being zapped. Next few minutes, we spent just watching as the client compulsively kept drawing, putting the pen down to talk, then carrying on getting absorbed in drawing again, getting more involved in what he was doing and adding more and more detail, then adding colour and motion. In total, he spent about 4 minutes on the picture, adding to it, putting the pen down for a few minutes to talk. But then, not talking, instead, he would pick up the pen and carry on drawing. I tried to get his attention to discuss his experience, but he struggled to tell me as he was more absorbed in continuing to draw. Below's the picture after about 4 minutes of his drawing. After the session, the client went home and drew an image off of a Disney video case. He said it only took him a few minutes to sketch it. He then put it on his computer and coloured it in. He said he was amazed at what he had done and didn't understand how it was possible. Since then, he'd continued to draw in this new way and felt compelled to draw, and has since gone on to teach himself to play guitar and piano and other creative pursuits. So that was his kind of 4 minutes in kind of drawing, if I can get it in focus, where he started adding in some movement and some background and what have you. So this book is the second in a planned series of 10 books on hypnotherapy. In this book, I've shared my perspective on the Ericksonian approach. If you take the time to learn and master the content in this book, you'll be way ahead of many other therapists in your ability to help people. You'll be able to do hypnosis without the need for rigid hypnotherapy scripts. You'll be client-centered and able to be responsive to the needs of your clients. You'll be able to be creative in your interventions. Book 3, Hypnotherapy Revealed, Hypnotherapy Transcripts, will share a wide selection of hypnotic inductions, that one, a wide selection of hypnotic inductions and therapeutic scripts, as well as additional information about how using the hypnosis scripts fits within therapy, how to structure therapy sessions, and how to understand and use the scripts. This book and the Introduction to Hypnotherapy book came first because I wouldn't want someone reading hypnotherapy transcripts and becoming a hypnotherapist who just reads scripts. I want the reader of the book to be comfortable to work unscripted, who will use the scripts for ideas and for education. And that's the end of that chapter. So we've made it to the end of 2 books now. You've now been through both those books. So feel free to give yourself a pat on the back for enduring my voice for 2 solid books. Let me have some of my drink now. So I'm not going to read this one, but obviously this one arrived today. My hypnotherapy transcripts. So it's got I don't know what I can show you. You probably can't see anything. There's too much light on it. There's lots and lots of stuff in there. Just sort of pages of scripts covering lots of different things. And it's 490 pages long or something like that. You're after chocolate now. So if you haven't already, you need to obviously make sure you check out Super TED so that you know what I'm talking about. Maybe watch a few of the episodes as well as the introduction. And his friend Spotty. You do enjoy my voice quite a lot, yes. So obviously the idea is that in the end there'll be 10 books able to be side by side. Abby's in the other room watching Noah Taff on Twitch, I think. Looks weird. He's not weird. I think we had the best cartoons. Have you seen Banana Man? If you think that Super Ted is weird, look up Banana Man. About Eric. Yeah, I did the. I actually did the front covers of the books of all 10 books. I don't know, in 2017 or something. Yeah, Magic Roundabout. That's good as well. And yeah, so we used to watch lots of interesting things. Batfink. I used to like watching Batfink as a kid. And Yvonne from the Yukon. Who else? Pingu. Pingu's cool. What question? Haven't seen a question. Yeah, Pingu is cool. And used to like watching Animals of Farthing Wood, but that's sad. And what else? David the Gnome. Obviously Fraggle Rock. Yeah, the Wombles. They weren't before my time. Or at least they were commonly on. Moomins. I used to find the Moomins scary, but the Moomins. Will Quack Quack. No, Graham didn't play guitar, piano, or anything like that. And David the Gnome ends very sad. I don't like either Teletubbies or Barney. But we did have Mr. Blobby on our TVs. I like the clangers. I like the clangers, yeah. Sooty and Co. Zig and Zag, yeah, they're cool. Back in the 80s and 90s, we had lots of really cool things on kids' TV. Obviously, things like the Chuckle Brothers. Bodger and Badger, yeah. Unfortunately, Bodger, the actor, has died now. And Ice Like Whizbit. Very few people seem to remember Whizbit, but Ice Like Whizbit. Yeah, Art Attack is good as well. You'll have to watch like a video of 80s and 90s British cartoon, British children's TV things. No, I don't think I've heard of that. Might be after my time. Maybe I'll find a video and share it. Say, here's a bunch of intros or something to British kids. Trapdoor. I've got the DVD box set of Trapdoor. You watched Vegetables. Yeah, there's lots and lots of things that I used to watch. With all the TV channels now, there's not really the same kind of in the old days what was good was that children's TV was on at very predictable times, and so you could just go and get it and watch it. Now it's obviously there are dedicated children's channels, but it's not quite the same. It used to be like Saturday morning, you'd have your kids' TV and stuff, and you'd get up at say 7 a.m. and watch cartoons. Don't know. I don't think I've heard of it. But yeah, so hopefully that was made enough sense, was interesting enough. And those of you who haven't watched the actual video itself, hopefully now, if you watch the video, you'll be able to think, "Oh, Dan's doing that because of this," and have an idea of why I'm doing what I'm doing throughout um, the session. And it's interesting that the results I got were as good as the results that others get when trying to trigger savant abilities. Uh, but they use transcranial magnetic stimulation to do it, or transcranial direct current stimulation. Um, Whereas I'm doing it using hypnosis, and um, their results fade once the brain goes back to normal, whereas my results continue on beyond that. I'm wearing my t-shirt again. Yeah, I decided that it was difficult to be able to judge the effect in any other color than white. Um, I had ordered a grey one as well, but the grey one didn't. No, not other colors. The grey one um, blended too much into the background of the background words because of it being darker, and made it just sort of harder to see properly. So I felt that it was probably best to just do it in white, because as I can't guarantee what it looks like on all the other colors unless I literally buy every single color, and then obviously that costs a lot of money to buy and ship every color to me. Unless I buy every single color, I can't tell which colors it works on and which it doesn't, because I realized that even on screen, it doesn't look. Um, it looks like it works, and in some cases, it looks like it works better. But then in real life, that's not necessarily the case. And obviously, I wanted it to be based on what it looks like in real life. So I just kept it simple. Purple would have been nice. Well, I've now set it just to white. Obviously, if I set it to purple, someone else might also end up buying it. And if it doesn't come out right, I don't want them to end up buying it. I don't think they offer pillows, annoyingly, as an option of something I can put it on. They offer small cushions. The trouble with a small cushion, potentially, is that if it's on a small cushion, it might already, it might be that you end up having to get quite close to see the bigger writing even before you see the smaller writing. You might have to, your head might be literally about to hit the pillow before you see it. I've not transcribed other videos into my books, but I have transcribed other videos in the past and added in commentary bits. And I've done videos where I've cut in the commentary. So, for example, there's the 10-minute induction of me doing the just take a moment to look at the spot over there. And in a moment, I'm just going to count from 3 down to 1. And on the count of 1, just close your eyes. And then I'm going to count from 1 up to 3. And on the count of 3, open your eyes and just look back at the wall, at that spot on the wall. And so that's a 10-minute induction. And then there's a 45-minute, it's on YouTube. There's a 45-minute on YouTube. It's part of a longer video, but a 45-minute video of me breaking that one induction down, explaining what I'm doing in front of the audience. So I'm hypnotizing the person in front of an audience. And so I'm explaining what I'm doing from the second I've called them up to take a seat through to the whole induction and everything. It takes 45 minutes to explain the 10-minute induction. Obviously 10 minutes of that 45 minutes is the induction being shown. So 35 minutes to explain it. There's a session that I don't know where I've got it available. I've had it available in many places, where I'm working with the client who wants to quit smoking, stop drinking Coca-Cola and lose weight. And so there's a sort of an edited down version of that includes me putting on screen a commentary of this is what I'm doing and why I'm doing it throughout that. Yeah, technically, if someone wanted it on a wall as a poster, then they could walk into a room and see one thing and get closer and see something else. Yeah, I don't think at the moment. I don't think they do a pillowcase. I don't think the company that YouTube uses to link it all up together does a pillowcase option. Well, maybe I'll look and see if there's some other colours, but there is a risk of it not working so well or standing out too much on some colours and not enough on others. It's quite difficult on fabric for when it's printed. It comes out looking slightly different to when it's not printed. Yeah, when it's on a computer screen. Yeah, they do seem to have pretty much everything but pillowcases. So yeah, so it comes out sort of different to on a computer screen. So on a computer screen, you look at it and think, "Yep, that looks perfectly fine." Up close, I can see the sort of narrow writing. From a distance, I can see the non-narrow writing. And then when you receive the item, it just doesn't work. I don't know if that would work, because it would be such a fine thing to have to try and work out for every single t-shirt that I would end up having to order probably dozens of t-shirts. Every time I try a different combination, I'd have to order that t-shirt, wait for a couple of weeks to receive the t-shirt, see if it's worked or not. Then if it hasn't, I've got to order another t-shirt with subtle changes based on what that looks like, and then wait another couple of weeks, having spent money on another t-shirt that I won't wear, for that one to then arrive. I had tried to, because none of them sell. I had thought there was too much there that none of it sells. No one sort of really goes there. So everything's still there. It's just not necessarily on my YouTube channel. Um, it's over on in the sort of shop bit. Um, just having a look. Yeah, if you click through onto the shop bit, you can see different bits and pieces, and you can find that straight from my um, website. But on YouTube, they were kind of uh, they were choosing what goes on my videos, and uh, yeah, that they. I just thought, no, I need to. Well, no one in all the years, I say all the years, it's been a couple of years of having them. No one, and even before that, I had them, but they weren't linked to my YouTube channel for some of the things in the past. And then YouTube, because YouTube recommended them, but and then brought in the functionality that they would connect it to your channel, and that's how it got connected to the channel. Yeah, if any of my stuff is bought, I then make some money from what's bought. It's just how YouTube decides what's going to be on YouTube. Um, I can change some of it, but then they kind of seem to decide things as well. Even when I change things, I find that different things are showing beneath videos, even though I've selected not to have those things showing. Um, whereas on I just link straight to a Teespring store, um, which I set up, sort of merchandise page kind of thing. And then I think you can click onto the items because again, I didn't want it to look. It was looking too crowded. That was my big problem. I was thinking, oh, what do I show? Because someone might want a T-shirt. They might want, um, say, a cup or a mug or something. Um, so I think if you click on an item, you can see what else has that design on, and then choose things that have got that design on or something, without me having to put every single item in to on view um, in the store. And this T-shirt could probably have got away with having the background writing just slightly more faded, but it is incredibly difficult to get the fading just right for a T-shirt. Because the grey version, I'm just trying to see if it's around. The grey version was literally done just slightly more faded than this version for the background writing, but the printing, that's slightly more faded, made it so it came out very much more faded on the printing. So if I just go to the see, so it's come out very much more faded on the printing, even though on the picture that I used, it's just slightly more faded. So from a long way away, you can still see it. So if I stand at, I've got a mirror at one end of the corridor. If I stand in the living room looking through the door into the corridor, then looking in that mirror, where technically it's double that length distance. So I'm looking from where I'm stood down the corridor into a mirror, which is obviously a mirror reflection of me being that distance away. So it's like I'm double the distance in away. You can then read sound of my voice at the back of that. Whereas this was just slightly less faded than that. And that slight difference and on white has made it so that it stands out easier. And literally it's just in terms of me making the difference between the fading, both of these are just ever so slightly different in fading. And yet there's a huge difference on printing between the two. You can all stare at me if you want. Just don't go into hypnosis too quickly while you do. So yeah, so the good thing about that one is obviously that up close, you can barely see that there's writing there in the background. Makes it even more effective because obviously then up close, the person's thinking, oh, I didn't even see that kind of the close-up writing. And up close, they can't see the distant writing. But yeah, maybe I'll make some other colors available and then just see what people you're being a seer. I've got chocolates in the fridge. Cadbury's Dairy Milk, Cadbury's Dairy Milk buttons, Cadbury's twirls. Trying to think what else I've got in the fridge. Cadbury's fingers. Milk chocolate is poor person's chocolate, really. It's like it's the choice of when there's nothing else and someone's happened to get you that. And I've got old chocolate around me. I've got 3 chocolate bunnies up on the shelf up there, a chocolate heart that you've seen down here. But yeah, so related to the topic we've been covering today, um, I have books on um, savant abilities because obviously I find that a fascinating subject. I find it fascinating that not so much around people having savantism uh, who have neurological damage or rewiring of their brain to do with, say, um, being autistic or something like that. But I'm fascinated by savantism where it just spontaneously occurs, where it's in people who are generally just healthy and well and they haven't had a knock on the head or anything, and then suddenly it's there. You're all still talking about chocolate. Poor? Oh, what? No, I meant like it's you're talking about the chocolate thing. Yeah, I didn't mean that the person is poor. I mean like it's the poor choice compared to other. It's like what you have if you can't find anything else to eat. I've got some Christmas chocolate buttons, chocolate coins in the other room as well. And I think I actually have some Milka chocolate in the other room as well. Little Milka chocolate like rectangles. And I suspect if I searched this room, I could probably find more chocolate because it. I put chocolate away and I forget about it. Or I get given chocolate as gifts, and normally I'm just too busy doing my own thing that I just sort of go, yeah, 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 and then just stuff it somewhere and then just carry on with what I'm doing and then completely forget that someone's given me chocolate. And then I do end up just discovering chocolate. I think I've still got a lot of my Christmas chocolate. I don't know. Did you miss something from the book? I read all the way to the end of the book, finished reading it today. I read the last part today. So today was part 4, where I did the therapy in action chapter. reading through the therapy session, which has my added in commentary. And I'm not talking about the thing that common squirrels live in. Let me swap my cup and glass over. So yes, we finished 2 books now. Gonna have a bit of a break from books now, from reading my own books at least. I'm not going to move on to book 3, as I've already mentioned. Because book 3 isn't the kind of book that I can really read live on air. Because it's just essentially inductions and scripts for different things. Except that wouldn't it still be me reading? If you started trying to read the book to me, you'd have to do it in the live chat. And in the live chat, that would essentially be you typing out the book, and I would be reading the typing out in the live chat. The glass is perfectly fine. I'm relatively stationary. I've got electric switches beneath me as well, so I'm very aware of, well, not directly beneath, but close enough that it would get wet if I dropped the glass. So I'm very aware of, or mindful of it. Wonder if the car has started. All you need to do is set up a Zoom chat. Do it via Zoom. Then you can all read via Zoom. You have to go Zoom soon. And I'm just waiting for Amazon to get back to me so that I can have book 3 available in Kindle. My new phone's too big for the shelf. So yeah, because that's obviously easier to read. Well, not easier to read on a Kindle, but cheaper on a Kindle. Yeah, Zoom's something that has suddenly become ridiculously well known, um, because of everyone uh, having to work from home, and so suddenly having to do video conferencing. Whereas before the last few months, it was much rarer to meet someone who knew what Zoom was. Or I used to find it quite. I almost never met someone who'd even heard of it. People had heard of Skype, but no one had really heard of Zoom. So I'm just wondering if there's anything anyone wants to talk about other than chocolate and Zoom, or eating chocolate on Zoom. Yes, I'm not a fan of computers or apps. If I could go without them, I would. I find them really stressful. They make me really angry. I spend most of my time, for any of you who know what Ali McBeal is, I spend most of my time kind of mentally going through things like Ali McBeal. Well, it isn't so much about needing extroverts; it's needing people who've got questions, um, or things to raise. Um, yeah, so with laptops and things like that, in my head, I'm smashing them to pieces, whacking them on the floor, jumping up and down on them, throwing them through windows. Um, and externally, I'm thinking, I don't want to have to do what's in my head, but this is really annoying me. Uh, but I don't want to do that with, for example, my laptop that I do all my video editing on is like £1,500 or something stupid, 1,800. No, it was reduced from £2,500, and I got it for 1,800, I think. Um, and so it's stupidly expensive, and I wouldn't want to damage it. No, I don't need that. I just need to not have computers in my life. If I suddenly got rich tomorrow, if I won the lottery or something, I would probably instantly give up everything that's related to computers. So I would stop on YouTube, I'd stop being on social media, I would stop being on, running my e-courses. I would literally stop doing everything and probably go back to having the most basic telephone, like an old Nokia phone or something, that literally can just make and receive phone calls, so that if Abby needs me, she can telephone me. But other than that, I would instantly just stop everything technological. Enjoy your appointment. Yeah, I would want to live in the woods, with minimal technology. I don't know. It'd have to be via pen and paper. When I worked in residential children's homes, um, the first company I worked for, everything was written in pen and paper. So you had all your different logbooks and things, like the logbook for the main, sort of main events from the day. So like people arriving, people leaving, people waking up, people going to bed, phone calls, etc. Then you had logbooks for no, I hate hugs. Then you had logbooks for uh, every child in the home, and you had logbooks if there was an emergency. You had logbooks if there was pretty much everything. There was like 50 or 60 different logbooks that you had to fill in every single day, but it was all done with a pen, and I was comfortable with that. It would be a bit of a, it would be a bit sort of tiring writing, literally handwriting, maybe 100 A4 sheets of paper a day worth of work, but I could do that. And whereas when I went to the second children's home that I worked at, the second company I worked for, they were saying, we're going to progress, we're going to move with the times. Everything has to be done with Word documents and has to be done on a computer. And I tried my absolute best to talk them out of that, telling them about how I think it would breach confidentiality, that it would be too easy for someone to manipulate the records. Literally tried everything, and they just said, no, 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 still going to push forward because it's the way things are going. And so I had no choice but to use computers there, and absolutely hated the fact I had to do that. And then every job since then, I've had to use computers, annoyingly. All my stuff with social services and everything, I had to use the police computer databases. I had to use the social services databases, the youth offending databases, lots of different computer systems, none of which work properly, all of which constantly crash and have problems, all of which will delete what you've just written. And so I really didn't like that, and all of which I would believe that if I press the wrong button, I'm going to wipe the entire system. So I've always got that kind of thought in my mind. Like if I use a bank machine, I worry that if I go to a cash point to get some money out, that I'm going to somehow mess up and wipe all the money out of the bank, that out of their electronic records, and that somehow that's going to be possible. I get the same when I used to have to use a till at Butlins. I used to worry that if I press a wrong combination of buttons, I'm going to crash the till system and somehow wipe the records in the till for saying how much, what the transactions are and how much money is made and all these sort of things. The same if I use the card readers in shops or the self-service checkouts. I worry that somehow I'm going to blow everything up. It's all going to explode. Everything's going to go wrong. The amount of swearing and shouting I do at self-service checkouts that don't do what I want them to do, that do things like, you scan an item, put it in the basket sort of area, and it tells you to place it in the basket area, in the bagging area. Like, well, I have. It is sitting there now. So you then pick it up. You've removed something from the area. Put it back. You put it back. Can you place your item in the area? I just did, and you're moaning that it's there. And when I took it, you moaned that I removed it, but you didn't moan before I scanned it. And then there's no one ever to help. And so anything to do with technology, my stress levels go from 0 to 100 really quickly. I get very angry really, really quickly. And I hate everything to do with any technology or anything like that. It just is a horrible experience. And so I try my best to not deal with technology if I can. Yeah, the only person obviously I've had close contact with is Abby in all that time. But then in my everyday life, it is incredibly rare for me to have contact with anyone other than Abby. Obviously, I encounter people in shops and things if I have to go into shops, but I pretty much go into shops to do food shopping, and so I obviously have to encounter checkout people, but that's about it. And what annoys me is when you then decide not to use the self-service bits because you think, nope, it causes me so many problems. There's never someone to help when you want helping. Um, and I'd rather just walk past a member of staff who can scan it all. And if there's a problem, they're the one with the problem, not me. Um, and I will just bag my stuff up. And so you're queuing, and then some member of staff will come over and say, don't you want to use the self-service checkouts? We've got, they're just over there. It's quicker to go and queue there and use them. And I'll be there saying, no, I want to see a real person. And they'll say, but there's a self-service checkout you can use. We want you to use that. Well, I don't want to use it. I want to see a real person. And then they'll argue with you over the fact that you don't want to use an electronic version of them. Instead, you want to see a real person. And by people seeing real people, maybe more real people would keep their jobs rather than the real people encouraging you to use their replacement, which is very odd. I've had it quite often, that kind of pressure. And sorry to hear about your losses. I'm trying to sort of read and reply to the different bits as I see them. So I'm reading them out of order, I think. Yeah, I find that they put a lot of pressure on. Um, and the worst is actually when it's like in the post office, where I don't like the post office self-service machines and or anything about them. And the amount of kind of aggressive pressure I'll get from the staff to try and make me go and use the self-service machines rather than stay queuing to see an actual human being. Um, and I just end up being very blunt with them and telling them to get lost and leave me alone. And then they normally get lost and leave me alone. Yeah, see, I probably wouldn't have a problem with these things if they just worked. It's a bit like with computers. I probably wouldn't have a problem with computers if they just worked. I don't like that they do updates when you don't want them to be doing updates, that they delete all your work because they've decided to do an update. And like when I've contacted Microsoft and said, your latest update has just lost me a big chunk of work. And they'll say, well, it does give you a warning. It lets you know in 30 seconds it's going to restart. And it's like, yes, I had a video processing. The video was going to take 8 hours to process. So I left my computer on and walked away from it to go and make a coffee. And I was gone longer than 30 seconds. And in that 30 seconds, it restarted. And they'll say, well, that's not our fault. It gives you the 30-second warning to let you know it's going to do that. Um, so, yeah, so things like that really, really kind of annoy me. If things just worked, then I probably wouldn't have a problem. Like if I could just press the on button and it was on, and then I could use it and it just did its job, then I'd be fine. Likewise, if I could just walk through a self-service bit, scan everything, pay and leave, that would be fine. But when you know that it's going to say, are you using your own bag? Yes. Put your bag in the bagging area, then press done when you're ready. Put your bag in the bagging area, press done. There's something unexpected in the bagging area. Yes, the bag you told me to put there. So you then remove the bag. You've removed something from the bagging area. Yes, the bag you said was unexpected. Um, so yeah, so if it all just worked, I probably wouldn't have a problem with it because it would just be working. Um, Thing is, obviously, as I mentioned in my Look Into My Eyes book, and as Abby and myself often sort of mention when we're asked together, um, I am very good at handling serious situations. I'm terrible with small, niggly things. So I'm terrible with things like, you know, computers irritating me, beeping microwaves irritating me, um, the washing machine beeping at me, or the tumble dryer beeping at me, or having to go and ask for help in a shop, or having to go and ask for the bill after a meal, having to tell someone what I want to eat, or any of those things I find incredibly stressful and very difficult to do, and will virtually have a breakdown trying to do them. But if I was in a building that's on fire, I'll be perfectly fine and calm, and I'll handle it well, and I'll be able to tell you what we need to do to get out safely, or have the best chance of getting out safely. If I was in any other kind of emergency, I'm generally very calm and capable of handling those. Um, it's the small kind of random things that I can't do. Do I feel the need for other company? Definitely not. It's incredibly rare that I feel any kind of need for any kind of company. I'm obviously very glad that Abby's in my life, and I love Abby, and we spend lots of time together. But I don't need other. I don't ever, or it's incredibly rare that unless I want to hypnotize someone, I don't ever really think about other people. So I don't think, oh, I haven't seen my best friend for ages. I better phone him and see how he is, or anything like that. Or, um, oh, I haven't caught up with my mum, or I haven't caught up. I don't know. I wonder how my mum is. I haven't spoken to her for a year. Or I wonder how one of my brothers is. Or that sort of thought never ever crosses my mind. I never think of someone else. Um, how would I handle a sudden zombie attack? Um, Fine. I would probably think. I'm often pointing out that's what I'm always waiting for. Abby and myself think differently about this. I love the idea of an apocalypse. I'm constantly saying, "Oh, I wish there could be an apocalypse." For years and years and years, since probably being a child, I've always thought the best thing that could happen is some kind of an apocalypse, because it normalizes everything, puts everyone on a level playing field. Everyone is kind of. It doesn't matter if beforehand you were doing a really, really high powered job, making lots of money, or whether beforehand you were working, washing up somewhere. You're all suddenly in the same kind of boat. You all are now perhaps having to survive in small communities because most of mankind are wiped out. So you're in small communities, you have to survive, and if you've got skills to survive, you're probably going to survive better. But also, you can then you're often isolated and in incredibly small communities, and um, it's not about like the money anymore. It's not about trying to, oh, I want my big house or anything, because you can't have that. That's not going to save you in any way. It's more about you have your small little community and you work together, and the focus is on working together as a small community, and or having just one or two or three or four or whatever of you going off out like doing stuff. And I quite like that idea. I quite like the idea of you don't have the stress of making sure you got to meet rent every week, every month. Don't have the stress of having to pay all your bills every month. Instead, all you're doing is living and making the most of your life. So I've always kind of had that idea of, wouldn't it be great if there was some kind of a zombie apocalypse or something, um, where you can just think, right, let's just go and nip off, set up a little community in the middle of the woods somewhere, um, near a natural spring, and fortify that area, set up your camp, start up some farming, just a small amount of farming just for what you need for those of you who are there. Um, bit of hunting and gathering within your area that you fortified, etc. Um, so I quite like the idea of that. I don't see that as a stress. That kind of thing isn't what would stress me out. That would be the thing that's making it so it's not stressful. That's the thing that solved the problems. It doesn't have to be a zombie attack. An asteroid would possibly do the same thing. There's lots of ways to the same outcome. But yeah, this current situation has largely not changed my life in the slightest. Um, the only time it's stressful is when I have to actually go outside and interact with people. And then you see that predominantly elderly seem to be completely oblivious to the fact that they're the most at risk. And I was in a shop buying some milk the other day, and there was a lady stood at the sort of the fridge counter with all the yogurts and things in, and an elderly person walked up behind and just said, "Excuse me," and leant straight over that woman's shoulder to pick something up off the shelf, seeming to completely be oblivious to the fact that there are all these markings over the floor telling you to keep 2 meters, marking out where 2 meters is. And they were just doing their own thing in their own world. And that's largely like when you're walking along a footpath, it ends up being that you'll have an elderly couple walking straight towards you. Abby and myself had this the other day. We were walking along the footpath. We went one behind the other, so that if they went one behind the other and they kept to one side of the footpath and we kept to the other, there was enough room for 2 meters between us. And they carried on walking literally down the very center of the footpath, not batting an eyelid, not paying any attention to us, just laughing and smiling and walking in a straight line. And Abby and myself walked in the road with the cars to avoid to make sure we kept 2 meters from the elderly who are walking straight towards us, completely, with no intention of moving out the way. Um, and that's the most common thing, is that at least in Chichester here, the most common thing is that it's elderly that literally will come straight up to you, walk literally touching you and stuff. And it's more of a risk that they might catch something from you, and it's more likely, and that would then have a more significant impact on them than if it was the other way around. And so it seems totally illogical that they don't seem to want to live. It's really confusing. Um, I don't understand why they don't want to live, because that's the only logic you can draw from it. That if they're intentionally putting themselves in a high risk situation and doing high risk behaviors they don't have to be doing, that they must obviously not want to be alive. So it seems to be old people, or obviously teenagers. Teenagers do the same. Teenagers, that they don't do the same in terms of they don't come up to you necessarily, but teenagers, at least in Chichester, you'll just see them with their energy drinks all sat around next to each other and walking along next to each other, um, as if there's nothing going on in the world. And then you've got the people that are kind of maybe on average, say 25 to 60, trying to keep away from others and trying to do the right thing. Yeah, if you put me in a busy shop, I well, if you put me even in a non-busy shop, I'm freaking out and essentially having a mix of a major panic attack with major anger normally rolled into it, trying to decide which one I should respond with, either panic and run away or get angry and try and scare everyone away, normally because of their harassment and getting too close to me. And this is not just in the current situation, this is literally in everyday life. If I walked into a clothes shop, if there's no one in it, I probably won't go in there because staff will likely pounce on me, and I don't want that. If there's a handful of people in there and there's a bit of space, then I'm not too bad for a very short period of time. Um, if there's more than that in there, then I'm likely to end up being on edge for the entire time I'm in there. And I then have to go and find somewhere to calm myself down, chill out, and recover from the experience. Nope. Mm. Yeah, I can see how that would be difficult to understand the person. On the positive, at least in theory, you won't catch anything from them. And hopefully, with the screen, they won't catch anything from you. So we're heading towards the end of this stream. I kind of gave up, I think, on trying to keep them to an hour. It was an aspiration, I think. And I don't specifically have plans for the tomorrow stream yet, because obviously I finished the book now. So it'll be a rest from books. And then obviously Monday is the sleep meditation creation session. Well, I think generally, for some reason, 2.5 to 3 hours seems to flow quite well. Uh, like it seems to have a beginning. I don't know how to describe it. It seems to have a natural kind of rhythm to it that ends with um, it kind of wrapping up comfortably. Whereas an hour always feels like things have just got going, and at that point, it's like in therapy. An hour, you end up in therapy with the client suddenly coming out with all this stuff just as you're wrapping up. And so you think, oh, if only I was doing like a 90 minute to 2 hour session. Whereas in a 2 hour therapy session, it feels like a nice, comfortable length that you've had this, the session building and then work happening and then it reaches an end point. Um, so a 2 hour session in therapy seems to work well. And for whatever reason, anytime I've tried to do this, um, obviously I never come on here thinking I will do 3 hours or anything like that. I often think, right, I wonder if I can keep it, not if I'm reading a book or something, but I think, right, let's try and keep it to an hour. But it just feels like an hour is the wrong place to stop. Um, and so it then goes on. And the natural stopping place seems to be that it kind of winds itself down about 3 hours in, which kind of fits with almost two ultradian cycles um, for some reason. If you're here, you can throw questions tomorrow. I'll be here 7:30 UK time. I don't yet know how many days in a row I'm going to be here. I'm sure there'll come a time when either um, the government will say things are changing, or I'll just think, right, I need a few days off or something. But for now, I'm here pretty much. Well, I'm here every day. I know it's what 54 or whatever of these in a row. Well, nearly in a row. There was one day where it was Abby's birthday, and so I took a day off. I literally just heard you sort of mention time has ceased to exist, and in the voice of the evil karate man in Karate Kid, I just heard in my head, uh, time does not exist in this dojo, does it? Obviously, as a play on the sentence that he says. Weird way my brain works. Weird way all our brains work. Yes, I have a mix of perfectly fine with the lockdown when my routine, because I don't have any change in routine. So that's obviously one. I spoke on the radio at the beginning of the lockdown on BBC Radio about being autistic and the current situation, and um, how it affects me, but also how it could affect others. And obviously, for me personally, it doesn't affect me in terms of my routine is that I'm self employed. I work from home. I turn on a computer, type on a computer, or edit videos on a computer, or edit audio on a computer, and then I close the computer down and then I go to bed. That's kind of pretty much my day. Um, so for me, nothing has really changed. The one kind of difference is when I go out. If I go out, so now the lockdown has been eased very slightly. I can go out obviously with Abby, and we can go for a walk um, together, keeping away from people as far as possible. Generally, going out for a walk um, is about as it's now about as busy on the very outskirts of Chichester. It's now about as busy as the maximum busyness that I'm comfortable with in terms of being out of the flat. Whereas normally it's too busy. I get really stressed whenever I'm out of the flat in even somewhere like Chichester, that's a small, reasonably small place. Um, and Abby was commenting on this the other day that while we're walking around the outskirts of Chichester, where we were walking, we only encountered perhaps a dozen or so other people in a walk all the way around the outside of Chichester. In the centre of Chichester, it's now far too busy for me to cope. I was so angry when we popped into the centre of Chichester and was suddenly encountering all these people and trying to dodge all these people and avoid everyone coming from different angles and what have you. So even when it was a little bit quieter, kind of before the lockdown eased a bit, um, I found it really difficult going out food shopping um, because of the behaviours of everyone and all these people suddenly being there and not seeming to follow the rules properly. But at the same time, I'm aware that if I had another routine, I'd probably be struggling with my change in my routine. I can still Simpsons o'clock is still Simpsons o'clock, still 6 p.m. every night, weekdays. I watch The Simpsons. That's still on. I've got the bonus that some nights I get double Simpsons. Um, so I still have pretty much the same routines. I've added this into my routine, but other than that, everything's kind of normal for me. But I am aware of how things could be different. And I know, for example, Abby's obviously struggled more than me in terms of not seeing people, like, not being able to see her family or anything. Um, but yeah, so Anyway, it's 3 hours now. And so I will go. Thank you all for joining me here. And I will see those of you who pop in tomorrow. I'll see you here at 7:30 UK time tomorrow evening. And feel free to give a thumbs up if you found this interesting at all. And feel free to subscribe if you aren't already subscribed and you'd like to get notifications, etc. Like click the bell icon and all that jazz. If you'd like to get notifications, etc. And you want to check out my other stuff. So I will see you tomorrow.